My friends, to live is to walk a tightrope between worlds. On one side stands the demand of work, the structure, the discipline, the duty. On the other side stands the call of relationship, the warmth, the laughter, the human bond. To lean too far into one is to risk falling into emptiness. But to balance both is to discover wholeness, and in wholeness lies individuation. Work gives you form. It is the hammer that shapes your destiny. Yet social life gives you soul. It is the mirror that reminds you that you are not a machine, but a living, breathing being. If you allow only one voice to speak, the voice of duty, you will wither in isolation. If you allow only the other, the voice of pleasure, you will drift into aimlessness. True life is found in the dance between the two. In Jungian thought, we speak of opposites, and the great task is not to destroy them, but to hold them in tension. The day belongs to labor, the night belongs to communion. To integrate both is to weave a tapestry of meaning. Your job is not your prison. It is your arena. And your social life is not your distraction. It is your nourishment. To balance them is to live a life both productive and alive. Work without friendship becomes sterile because labor, in its purest form, is meant to be creative energy flowing outward from the soul. When work is stripped of connection, when it becomes a cold transaction of hours for wages, it begins to wither the human spirit. A man or woman who gives every ounce of energy to the task, but never shares laughter, trust, or companionship with others eventually feels like a machine, functional but lifeless. Friendship gives color to the gray of routine. It adds a deeper purpose beyond the paycheck. To work side by side with others, not only as colleagues but as companions in the journey of life, transforms labor into fellowship. In friendship, the task becomes lighter. The hours become more bearable, and the meaning of achievement is multiplied. Without it, success tastes hollow, and the soul longs for a warmth that numbers and titles can never provide. A true productivity is not only the result of efficiency. It is born from a workplace where human connection breathes life into duty. Friendship without work becomes shallow because relationships that are never tested by responsibility or shared purpose often remain at the surface level of comfort and entertainment. Companionship that only seeks pleasure without facing challenges together lacks the depth that struggle and growth can bring. Work, whether it is professional labor, a shared project, or even the daily responsibilities of life, provides the soil in which friendship can take root and grow stronger. When friends labor side by side, supporting one another through deadlines, sacrifices, and hardships, their bond is sealed with meaning. Without this grounding in purpose, friendship risks becoming a place of escape, rather than a source of strength. It becomes centered only on fleeting amusement instead of lasting loyalty. True friendship matures not in the absence of work, but in the presence of it, because it is in facing difficulty together that trust deepens, and the soul recognizes the sacredness of human connection. Friendship without work becomes shallow because it hovers only on the surface of human connection, never diving into the depths where true loyalty is forged. When companions gather only for laughter, pleasure, or distraction, the bond may feel warm in the moment, yet it lacks the enduring strength that comes from building, striving, and struggling together. Work, whether it is the work of career, the work of creating, or even the daily work of life itself, provides the shared trials that test and solidify friendship. It is in standing beside a friend during their burdens, lending a hand when the load is heavy, and contributing to something greater than yourselves that the relationship finds its roots. Without work, friendship risks becoming like a garden without soil. Beautiful for a short while, but unable to withstand the winds of time. Friends who never share effort, sacrifice, or responsibility remain companions of convenience rather than companions of destiny. True friendship requires more than enjoyment. It requires the willingness to labor for one another's growth, to sweat together in the pursuit of meaning, and to carry together the responsibilities that life demands. Only then does friendship transcend the shallow and touch the profound, becoming a bond not of circumstance but of the soul. Time is your true currency. Spend it wisely, for unlike money, it can never be earned back once it is spent. Every hour you invest, whether in work, in relationships, or in solitude, is a fragment of your life that you give away. To waste time is not merely to lose minutes. It is to diminish the very substance of your existence. Many believe that wealth, possessions, or status are the measures of success, yet all of these can be regained if lost. Time, however, is the one resource that slips silently away, never to return. To recognize time as your truest currency is to awaken to the responsibility of how you live each day. When you devote endless hours to tasks that drain your spirit, while neglecting those who nourish your soul, you create an inner poverty that no paycheck can cure. Likewise, to spend all your hours in social distractions without building purpose and discipline is to trade the future for fleeting comfort. Wisdom lies in the balance, investing your hours where both your work and your relationships can grow. Ask yourself each morning, where will I spend my currency today? Will it go towards something that deepens my soul, strengthens my path, and honors my values, or will it be squandered on empty pursuits? For in the end, your life is nothing but the accumulation of how you have spent your time. To spend it wisely is not only to live well, it is to live meaningfully. The self thrives in rhythm, not chaos, because the psyche, like nature, is built upon cycles, patterns, and harmony. Just as the heartbeat sustains life through its steady rhythm, and the seasons unfold in an ordered dance of renewal, so too does the human soul require a structure that nourishes balance. When our days fall into disorder, when sleep is sacrificed, meals are rushed, work has no boundaries, and relationships are neglected, the psyche begins to fracture. Chaos may seem exciting for a moment, but over time it erodes clarity, drains energy, and scatters the focus of the soul. Rhythm, on the other hand, creates a sanctuary for growth, a rhythm of rising and resting, of working and connecting, of striving and reflecting, gives the self the space to unfold naturally. In rhythm, there is both discipline and freedom, for it does not confine, it guides. Like a drumbeat that keeps the dancer grounded, rhythm allows us to move through life with grace rather than frenzy. To live in rhythm is to honor both work and play, to respect both solitude and togetherness. It means carving out sacred spaces for rest just as much as for effort. In rhythm, the ego no longer scrambles to control everything, because it trusts the flow of time. The self then feels supported, integrated, and alive. Chaos seeks to tear you apart, but rhythm weaves you together, turning the fragments of your days into a coherent story that carries you toward wholeness. A job gives you purpose, but people give you meaning. For purpose and meaning are not the same. Purpose is the direction of your energy, the structure that keeps you moving forward when life feels uncertain. It is the discipline of rising each morning with a task to fulfill, a contribution to make, a role to embody. Work anchors you in the world, reminding you that your existence is not idle but capable of shaping reality. Without purpose, life drifts into confusion and despair. Yet even the noblest purpose becomes hollow if pursued in isolation. You may achieve great heights in your career, accumulate wealth, or build impressive accomplishments, but if there are no people to share the journey with, the triumph echoes in emptiness. People, friends, family, mentors, and companions bring warmth to the structure of purpose. They provide the laughter in moments of struggle, the encouragement when purpose feels heavy, and the celebration when success is achieved. Meaning emerges not merely from what you do but from how your doing touches others. A job can provide identity, but people remind you of your humanity. Work may tell you what you are capable of, but relationships reveal who you truly are. To balance the two is to live a life both grounded and rich, purpose as the spine that holds you upright, and meaning as the breath that makes life worth living. Without one, you collapse into despair. Without the other, you suffocate in emptiness. But when both are present, the self feels whole. To schedule is to honor both labor and love. For a schedule is not merely a list of obligations, but a sacred map of your values. When you place something on your calendar, you are declaring to yourself and to the world that this matters, that it deserves your time, your energy, and your presence. Too often we imagine scheduling only as a way to meet deadlines and fulfill professional duties, but to schedule wisely is to recognize that your relationships, your rest, and your joy are equally worthy of deliberate attention. Labor without order collapses into chaos, and love without time collapses into neglect. By scheduling, you create boundaries that protect the balance between the demands of work and the nourishment of human connection. It is a way of saying to your job, yes, I will give you my best during these hours, and to your loved ones, yes, you are worthy of space in my life, and I will not allow the noise of business to drown out your voice. The act of scheduling is an act of integration. It prevents one domain of life from consuming the other, and it reminds you that wholeness is not found in extremes but in harmony. To schedule is not rigidity, it is reverence. It is the conscious choice to weave labor and love into the fabric of your days so that neither is forgotten, and both are honored as essential to the fullness of the self. The unconscious rebels if you deny joy too long because the psyche is not built to live only on discipline, duty, and responsibility. Beneath the surface of your waking life, the unconscious carries the primal needs of the soul: play, laughter, creativity, love, and wonder. When you silence these instincts for too long, convincing yourself that productivity alone is enough, the unconscious begins to push back. It speaks first in whispers: fatigue that lingers, irritability without reason, a sense of emptiness even in success. But if ignored, those whispers grow louder, into dreams filled with restlessness, into burnout that no achievement can fix, into sudden outbursts of rebellion against the very order you worked so hard to build. Joy is not a luxury, it is medicine for the psyche. To allow joy is to acknowledge that you are more than a worker, more than a role, more than a machine bound by deadlines. Joy reconnects you to the childlike vitality that still lives within, the part of you that knows life is not only about survival but about beauty, connection, and creation. Without joy, the self dries up; with joy it blossoms. The unconscious does not rebel to punish you, it rebels to save you. It resists your neglect because it knows that without joy, you cannot live fully, only endure. To honor joy, then, is to live in alignment with the whole of your being. It is to grant space for laughter as well as labor, for wonder as well as willpower, for play as well as purpose. In doing so, you bring balance, and the unconscious no longer needs to fight for your attention. It flows in harmony with your life. Overwork is not strength. It is shadow in disguise, for what often appears on the surface as dedication or discipline can secretly be the mask of fear, insecurity, or unacknowledged desire. Many wear their exhaustion like a badge of honor, believing that endless hours prove their worth, that sacrifice of health and relationships is evidence of greatness. Yet beneath this facade lies the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche that drives us compulsively when we refuse to confront our deeper needs. Sometimes overwork is the shadow of fear: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as not enough. Sometimes it is the shadow of pride, of the need to dominate, to prove superiority, to silence inner doubts by drowning them in business. And sometimes it is the shadow of avoidance, burying oneself in tasks to escape loneliness, unresolved pain, or the vulnerability of intimacy. What masquerades as strength is often the refusal to look inward. True strength is not found in exhaustion but in integration. It is the ability to labor with devotion while also honoring rest, love, and renewal. To confront the shadow of overwork is to ask yourself, what am I really running from? What am I trying to prove? What am I afraid to feel if I slow down? Only when these questions are faced can work become a conscious expression of purpose rather than an unconscious prison. The self does not thrive in extremes. It thrives in balance. Overwork fractures you, leaving body and soul depleted, while balanced effort sustains you, giving both achievement and joy. Remember, strength is not measured by how much you can endure, but by how whole you can remain while you achieve. Overwork is the shadow's trap, balance is the self's liberation. Isolation breeds neurosis, connection breeds renewal, because the human psyche is not designed to exist in a vacuum. The soul requires reflection, and it finds that reflection most clearly in the presence of others. When a person isolates themselves too long, their thoughts begin to circle inward, feeding upon themselves without the balancing influence of dialogue, touch, or companionship. In solitude, imagination can become distorted, fears can grow unchecked, and the mind may turn minor worries into overwhelming obsessions. This is the soil in which neurosis takes root. The overgrowth of thought without the pruning of relationship. Connection, by contrast, acts as a mirror and a medicine. In the presence of another, you are reminded that you are not alone in your struggles, not trapped in the labyrinth of your own thoughts. A friend's laughter can dissolve the heaviness of your inner world. A simple conversation can break the cycle of rumination. Even a moment of shared silence can restore peace to the restless heart. Connection grounds you in the reality of shared humanity, reminding you that life is not a solitary burden but a collective journey. It is not that solitude is wrong. Indeed, reflection and stillness are vital for individuation. But when solitude hardens into isolation, the psyche begins to suffocate. Renewal comes from balance, a time alone to listen to the self, and time with others to awaken joy, empathy, and belonging. To reach out, to connect, to allow yourself to be seen. These are not weaknesses, but lifelines to wholeness. Where isolation fractures, connection heals. Where isolation closes in, connection opens the soul again to the possibility of life. To neglect work is to betray potential. For work is not merely a burden placed upon us by society. It is the arena where our inner gifts meet the outer world. Every individual carries within them a seed of possibility, a unique constellation of talents, strengths, and visions waiting to be realized. Work is the soil in which that seed is planted, the discipline that allows it to grow, and the sunlight that draws it toward its full expression. When you neglect work, you deny yourself the chance to see what you might become. You refuse the call of destiny that whispers, "There is more in you yet to be revealed." Without work, potential remains only as fantasy. Beautiful but unrealized, a dream never given form. Neglect turns talent into regret, and energy into stagnation. The psyche, deprived of its chance to create, begins to decay under the weight of unused possibility. This is why prolonged idleness so often breeds despair. It is not only boredom but the soul mourning its unlived life. Work is the sacred contract between your inner world and the outer one. It is the act of giving shape to your ideas, transforming invisible possibility into tangible reality. To neglect it is to betray not only yourself but also the world, which waits for the gift that only you can bring. Purpose is not found in avoiding effort. It is discovered in the fire of labor, in the struggles that polish raw potential into mastery. To honor work is to honor the self. It is to say, "I will not waste what has been entrusted to me. I will not leave my talents buried in the dark. I will bring forth what lies within, so that my life may be a testament to what is possible." To neglect work is betrayal, to embrace it is fulfillment. To neglect friends is to betray soul. For friendship is not a luxury ornament of life, but a vital nourishment for the psyche. The human spirit is not meant to exist in isolation. It longs for mirrors in which it can see itself, voices that affirm its worth, and hands that steady it when it falters. Friends are those mirrors, those voices, those hands. They remind us that our existence is not merely about survival or achievement, but about connection, warmth, and belonging. When you neglect friends, you silence these reminders, and the soul begins to starve for recognition and intimacy. The neglect of friendship does not happen all at once. It creeps in subtly, one missed call, one postponed gathering, one more excuse of being too busy. Over time, the bonds loosen, the laughter fades, and what was once a living relationship becomes a shadow of memory. In turning away from friendship, you betray not only the other person but also the deepest part of yourself that longs for communion. For the soul is relational by nature. It comes alive in the give and take of genuine connection. Friends are the sacred witnesses of your journey. They see you not only in your victories but in your struggles, not only in your strength but in your fragility. To neglect them is to walk the path of life unaccompanied, carrying burdens that were never meant to be borne alone. And while work may give purpose, it cannot heal the loneliness that neglect of friendship creates. To honor friendship is to honor the soul's cry for intimacy, for shared meaning, for love without condition. It is to recognize that success without companionship is emptiness disguised as fulfillment. To neglect friends is betrayal, to nurture them is salvation. For in the embrace of true friendship, the soul does not merely exist, it thrives. Individuation is not solitude alone. It requires mirrors in others, for the path to the self cannot be walked entirely in isolation. Solitude is essential, yes. It is in silence and inward reflection that one begins to hear the faint voice of the unconscious and confront the hidden archetypes that shape life. But solitude alone can lead to distortion, for without reflection in others, we risk mistaking illusion for truth. The self is not formed in a vacuum. It is revealed in relationship. Every person you meet is a mirror, reflecting back to you parts of yourself you cannot see on your own. A friend may awaken your capacity for compassion. A rival may confront you with your shadow. A mentor may remind you of your potential. These encounters are not distractions from individuation. They are instruments of it. For only through relationship do we learn how our inner world touches the outer, how our values, wounds, and dreams interact with the greater fabric of humanity. To shut oneself away completely is to miss the dialogue that makes wholeness possible. The unconscious speaks through others as much as it does through dreams. It sends teachers, companions, and even adversaries to draw out what lies dormant in us. In this way, relationships are not accidents but necessary catalysts for growth. Individuation, then, is a balance. solitude for inner listening, and connection for outer reflection. To walk only one side is to remain incomplete. True wholeness emerges when the wisdom of silence and the challenge of relationship come together, shaping a self that is not only inwardly realized but outwardly alive. For the self is not meant to remain hidden in the cave. It is meant to stand in the world, mirrored and refined by the presence of others. Burnout is the body's cry against imbalance, the unmistakable signal that the rhythm of life has been broken. It is not weakness, nor is it a failure of willpower. It is the wisdom of the body and soul demanding that you listen. When you push yourself beyond natural limits, when work consumes every ounce of energy while rest, joy and connection are neglected, the body intervenes. It whispers at first through fatigue, irritability, or restlessness. If ignored, the whisper grows louder: headaches, sleepless nights, numbness, and finally the collapse of spirit that we call burnout. Burnout arises when we forget that we are not machines but living beings woven of body, mind, and soul. The ego, intoxicated by ambition or fear, insists that we can press forward endlessly, but the deeper self knows otherwise. It knows that work must be balanced with renewal, that achievement without restoration is unsustainable, and that life loses its meaning when all energy is drained into survival. A burnout is not the enemy. It is the body's last attempt to protect you, to force you back into balance when you have wandered too far. To heal from burnout is not simply to take a short rest and then return to the same destructive patterns. It requires reorientation, learning to honor the cycles of energy, to set boundaries that safeguard joy, to invite silence, friendship, and play back into your days. It means listening to the wisdom of your body as you would listen to the voice of a teacher. For the body does not lie. It reveals what the soul has been denied. To ignore burnout is to betray yourself. To heed it is to awaken. It is the threshold where exhaustion can become transformation, where imbalance becomes the invitation to live in wholeness once more. Burnout is not the end of your strength. It is the beginning of your renewal, if only you choose to listen. Celebration restores energy for greater labor because the human spirit cannot thrive on effort alone. Work, no matter how meaningful, consumes energy. It draws upon your reserves of focus, strength, willpower. Without renewal, even the noblest labor becomes heavy, and the joy of purpose begins to fade into exhaustion. Celebration is the soul's way of refilling what labor has spent. It is the pause that breathes life back into the weary, the reminder that we are not only workers but beings who need joy, laughter, and ritual to feel whole. Celebration is not idleness, it is sacred rhythm. Just as the farmer allows the field to rest after harvest, so must we allow ourselves to rejoice after struggle. To celebrate is to acknowledge that effort has meaning, that achievement is worthy of recognition, and that life itself is more than toil. In the act of gathering with friends, lifting a toast, or simply pausing to honor what has been accomplished, the spirit receives nourishment that no amount of sleep alone can provide. When we deny ourselves celebration, we rob work of its deeper fulfillment. Life becomes an endless cycle of what's next, rather than an appreciation of what has been. Over time, this breeds emptiness, for the psyche longs not only to strive but to savor. Celebration gives color to the black and white of routine. It transforms duty into dance. And yet, celebration is not only for the grand victories. It is for the small ones as well. To pause to smile at progress, to share gratitude with others. These are all forms of celebration that keep the flame of energy alive. For in celebration, the soul remembers that life is not only about carrying burdens but about lifting them. Not only about building but also about enjoying what has been built. Thus, celebration is not an indulgence. It is fuel. It restores energy, renews vision, and prepares the heart to return to labor not with dread but with a spirit refreshed. In honoring celebration, you honor both the effort and the joy of being fully alive. Your colleagues are not just workers. They are human stories, living beings with dreams, fears, and histories as vast and complex as your own. Too often, in the machinery of daily labor, we reduce the people beside us to roles, functions, or titles: the manager, the assistant, the technician, the intern. In doing so, we strip them of their humanity, seeing only their utility in the system rather than the fullness of their lives. But each colleague carries within them an entire universe of experiences. A childhood that shaped them, struggles they have endured, hopes that guide them, and private battles no one else may ever see. When you recognize your colleagues as stories rather than tools, work transforms. The workplace ceases to be a sterile arena of tasks and deadlines, and becomes instead a community of souls, each contributing their chapter to a collective narrative. The laughter in the break room, the shared frustrations of a hard day, the quiet encouragement before a big presentation. These are not trivial moments, they are threads that weave humanity into the fabric of labor. To treat colleagues only as workers is to impoverish yourself as well, for you deny the richness of connection that makes even the hardest work bearable. But when you honor their humanity, when you listen, empathize, and recognize the fullness of their story, you not only uplift them, you nourish your own soul. For it is in seeing others deeply that we ourselves are seen. Your colleagues are not just bodies filling roles, they are lives unfolding beside yours. Each interaction is an opportunity to honor that truth. Work will always involve duties, but meaning arises when we remember that behind every desk, every title, every task, there is a story deserving of respect. To see your colleagues as human stories is to invite compassion, unity, and renewal into the workplace. And in doing so, you transform labor into a shared journey rather than a lonely pursuit. Weekends are temples. Enter them with reverence. For they are not merely days off but sacred pauses built into the rhythm of life. In a world that constantly demands more, weekends are the gift of time returned, a space carved out for renewal, reflection, and connection. To treat them as nothing more than extensions of the workweek, days to catch up on tasks, to remain tethered to deadlines, or to drown in distractions is to desecrate their purpose. The weekend is a sanctuary, a time to lay down the burdens of labor and remember that you are not only a worker but a soul in need of nourishment. When you honor the weekend as a temple, you approach it with intention. You rest not out of laziness but out of respect for your own limits. You connect not out of obligation but out of love for those who walk beside you in life. You celebrate, reflect, and breathe, allowing your inner world to realign before returning to the demands of duty. Just as one enters a temple with humility and gratitude, so too should we enter the weekend with awareness, asking, how can I use this sacred time to restore my energy, deepen my relationships, and reconnect with myself? The weekend is not an escape from life. It is part of the rhythm that makes life whole. Work gives structure, but rest gives meaning. Without these pauses, labor becomes an endless march that drains the spirit and dulls the joy of living. But when weekends are embraced as holy time, they become the hearth where energy is rekindled, where love is renewed, and where the soul finds its center again. To enter the weekend with reverence is to recognize that it is not wasted time but essential time. It is the temple where you honor your humanity, where you balance labor with love, and where you remember that life is not only about productivity but about presence. In this sacred rhythm, work regains its vitality, and the self remains whole. Do not confuse business with greatness, for constant motion is not the same as meaningful progress. In our age, it has become easy to equate a packed schedule, endless meetings, and overflowing to-do lists with importance, as though being overwhelmed is proof of success. But business can be nothing more than distraction dressed in noble clothing. It keeps the hands moving but often leaves the soul empty. Greatness, on the other hand, is not measured by how much you do, but by the depth and clarity with which you live and act. Business often arises from fear, the fear of being overlooked, of seeming unproductive, of facing the silence that might reveal what truly matters. It is the ego's way of proving its worth by filling every moment, even if those moments lack true purpose. Greatness, however, is born of vision, of knowing when to act and when to be still. It is deliberate, not frantic, focused, not scattered. Greatness does not chase every opportunity but chooses the few that align with destiny. To confuse business with greatness is to risk living your life like a hamster on a wheel. Exhausted, impressive in effort, but going nowhere. True greatness is like an arrow. It does not flail in every direction but flies with precision toward its mark. It is not about how much ground you cover but about the significance of where you arrive. The soul does not thrive in endless activity. It thrives in meaningful action. Business can drain the spirit, while greatness nourishes it. Learn to distinguish between the noise of constant doing and the music of purposeful being. For in the end, no one will remember how many tasks you completed in a day, but they will remember the impact of your presence, the clarity of your vision, and the love and wisdom you brought into the world. That is greatness. Laughter is medicine for the worker's fatigue. because the human spirit was never designed to endure endless strain without release. Work, though necessary and often noble, places weight upon the body and mind. Over time, even the most passionate laborer feels the heaviness of deadlines, responsibilities, and the repetition of daily tasks. If this weight is never lifted, fatigue settles into the soul, dulling creativity, draining motivation, and making every effort feel like a burden. Laughter is the antidote. It pierces through the heaviness and restores vitality in a way nothing else. Laughter is not mere amusement. It is a profound act of healing. In the moment of laughter, tension dissolves, the nervous system resets, and the heart remembers lightness. It reconnects us to play, to the child within us who knows that joy is not separate from life's seriousness, but an essential part of it. When shared among colleagues or friends, laughter does more than refresh the individual. It binds people together, turning workplaces into communities and fatigue into fellowship. A joke shared during a long day, a smile in the midst of pressure, or a burst of laughter over something small can remind everyone that they are human, not machines. To deny laughter in the name of professionalism or relentless efficiency is to cut off one of the soul's greatest sources of renewal. Without it, fatigue grows unchecked, and the joy of purpose fades. But when laughter flows freely, even the hardest work becomes bearable, because the spirit finds balance again. It is not wasted time. It is time that gives strength back to labor. Thus, laughter should not be treated as a distraction from work but as a vital companion to it. It is the medicine that keeps fatigue from consuming the worker, the light that brightens the dim corridors of duty, and the spark that keeps the fire of the self alive amidst the demands of life. Where there is laughter, there is resilience. Where there is resilience, there is the strength to labor with heart again. Achievement without relationships tastes of dust because success, when hoarded in solitude, cannot nourish the soul. You may climb the highest mountain of accomplishment, earn the titles, secure the wealth, and gain the applause of strangers, but if there is no one to share the journey with, the victory turns hollow. Human beings are not sustained by trophies or accolades alone. They are sustained by love, by connection, by the warmth of companionship. Without these, achievement becomes like a feast without flavor, plentiful yet unsatisfying. The psyche longs not only to accomplish but to belong. Accomplishment can give direction and discipline, but belonging gives meaning and joy. When relationships are neglected in the pursuit of ambition, success begins to carry the bitter aftertaste of loneliness. You may sit in a house built by your labor, but if there are no friends to laugh within its walls, it feels like an empty monument. You may rise to prominence in your field, but if your heart is estranged from those who matter most, your victories echo only in silence. True achievement is never solitary. It draws its richness from the bonds that shape and sustain us along the way. The mentor who guides us, the colleague who stands with us, the friend who celebrates our progress, the family who offers unwavering love. These relationships transform personal success into shared meaning, turning dust into bread that truly nourishes. To seek achievement without relationships is to mistake survival for life. To cultivate both is to discover wholeness, labor that is fruitful, and love that makes it worth living. For in the end, the measure of a life is not only in what you built but in who you built it with. Without relationships, even the grandest achievements turn to dust. With them, even the smallest victories become eternal. True leadership honors both deadlines and dinners, because authentic leadership is not measured only by efficiency or results, but by the ability to hold together the full fabric of human life. Deadlines represent duty, the necessity of structure, accountability, and achievement in the world of work. They are vital, for without them, projects collapse into disorder and vision never takes form. Yet dinners represent something just as essential: connection, presence, and the nourishment of relationships. To honor one without the other is to lead only half a life. A leader who honors only deadlines may achieve results, but leaves behind a trail of burnt-out workers, strained families, and hollow victories. Such leadership treats people as rather than souls, valuing productivity over humanity. On the other hand, a leader who honors only dinners, neglecting discipline and responsibility, drifts into sentimentality and fails to inspire growth. True leadership requires the wisdom to balance both, the firmness of commitment with the tenderness of care. When a leader respects deadlines, they create trust in their reliability and vision. When they also make space for dinners, for time with loved ones, for conversation, for laughter. They remind everyone that life is larger than the office, larger than the task at hand. Such balance gives the team not only the strength to work harder, but the reason to do so, because their humanity is acknowledged, not erased. To honor both deadlines and dinners is to lead not only with the mind but with the heart. It is to understand that people give their best when they know their lives beyond work are valued. It is to embody wholeness, showing that achievement and love need not be enemies but can exist side by side. This is the mark of a leader who does more than manage projects. They inspire lives. For true leadership is not simply about reaching goals, it is about guiding others toward wholeness, where duty and delight coexist in harmony. A balanced life is an archetype of harmony, for within it we find the eternal image of wholeness that Jung called the self. Just as the psyche seeks integration of shadow and light, the individual must seek integration of work and rest, ambition and relationship, solitude and community. Balance is not a luxury but a necessity. Without it, the soul becomes fractured, pulled endlessly between extremes that exhaust and disorient. When life leans too heavily toward labor, the spirit withers in neglect of joy. When it leans too far toward leisure, potential withers in neglect of duty. Harmony is found not in choosing one over the other, but in holding them together with wisdom. The archetype of harmony appears across myths and cultures as the union of opposites, the yin and yang, the sacred marriage, the dance of sun and moon. In the same way, balance in life is a symbolic enactment of this greater truth. That fulfillment comes when all parts of the self are honored. A balanced life allows the worker to labor with focus while also savoring the warmth of family, the companionship of friends, and the silence of the inner world. Each aspect feeds the other, like instruments in an orchestra that together create a symphony. When life loses balance, chaos follows. Overwork leads to burnout, and overindulgence leads to emptiness. But when harmony is restored, energy flows naturally, purpose feels steady, and joy emerges not as an escape from duty but as its rightful companion. This is why balance is not weakness but strength. It is the capacity to remain centered in a world of competing demands, to honor every voice within the psyche without letting one dominate the whole. A balanced life is more than time management. It is soul management. It is the recognition that we are not machines built only to produce, nor wanderers meant only to drift. We are beings of depth who must weave together discipline and delight, effort and ease, outer striving and inner reflection. To live this way is to embody the archetype of harmony itself, and in doing so, to walk the path of individuation with grace. To say no is also to say yes to deeper balance, for every refusal is not merely a rejection but a redirection of energy toward what truly matters. In a world that constantly demands more hours, more commitments, more availability, the soul can easily become scattered, drained of focus and robbed of peace. Saying no is an act of inner authority, a boundary drawn not from selfishness but from wisdom. It acknowledges that your time, energy, and attention are finite, and if they are poured indiscriminately into every demand, nothing of true value will flourish. When you say no to an unnecessary obligation, you are saying yes to rest that restores you. When you say no to overextending yourself for the sake of appearances, you are saying yes to authenticity. When you say no to yet another late night at work, you are saying yes to dinners with loved ones, to laughter, to presence. Each refusal protects the possibility of balance, ensuring that life is not consumed by the endless appetite of external demands but guided by the deeper rhythm of the self. The unconscious suffers when one says too often without discernment. It rebels in the form of stress, fatigue, resentment, or illness, warning signs that balance has been betrayed. To learn the sacred power of no is to listen to this voice of the psyche and honor its wisdom. It is a form of individuation, the courage to align life with one's true priorities rather than with the expectations imposed by others. Thus, no is not the end of generosity but its refinement. It preserves your strength for the commitments that matter most, your purpose, your relationships, your health, your growth. It creates the space where meaning can thrive. In this way, every no becomes a deeper yes. Yes to harmony, yes to authenticity, yes to a life that is whole. True balance is not found in pleasing everyone but in honoring the self, and sometimes the most powerful act of leadership over one's life is the courage to say no. Love needs space on the calendar as much as meetings do, because relationships, like work, demand intention and presence. Too often, people guard their professional schedules with vigilance, blocking out hours for projects, deadlines, and conferences, while assuming that love will somehow sustain itself in the margins of leftover time. But love, like any meaningful endeavor, requires cultivation. If it is not given room to breathe and grow, it begins to wither under the weight of neglect. Meetings are scheduled because they matter to progress, so too must dinners, walks, conversations, and simple moments of being together be scheduled because they matter to the soul. Love is not a passive force that thrives without effort. It needs presence, attention, and ritual. When you place love on your calendar, you are declaring that intimacy, companionship, and connection are not afterthoughts but priorities equal to any professional responsibility. The unconscious knows this truth well. When love is neglected for too long, it surfaces in the form of loneliness, resentment, or disconnection, no matter how successful one becomes in career. Achievements may fill your resume, but if the heart's calendar is empty, the life feels barren. Conversely, when love is nurtured with intentional time, even the heaviest workload becomes lighter, because affection and connection replenish the inner reserves of energy. To give love space on the calendar is not weakness or indulgence. It is wisdom. It means you understand that balance is not found in choosing between ambition and affection, but in weaving them together into the fabric of a meaningful life. Meetings may sustain the business, but love sustains the human being who carries that business forward. A life that schedules only tasks but not tenderness becomes efficient but empty. A life that schedules both becomes whole. Thus, to honor love with time is to honor the self, for it is through our relationships that we see our truest reflections. By placing love on the calendar, you protect what is sacred, ensuring that the heart beats with the same rhythm of priority as the work that fills your days. This is not sentimentality. It is individuation lived in balance, where labor and love coexist with dignity. Silence with friends can heal more than noise at work, for in true friendship there is no demand to perform, no pressure to impress, no need to justify one's existence. In the company of a trusted companion, silence itself becomes a language, rich with understanding, acceptance, and presence. Words are not always necessary for healing. Often it is the simple act of being together, breathing the same air, sharing the same moment, that restores the weary spirit more deeply than any achievement in the workplace ever could. The noise of work is filled with deadlines, instructions, meetings, and endless chatter that exhausts the psyche. It keeps the mind active but often leaves the soul empty. Silence with a friend, by contrast, nourishes the soul because it allows you to rest without judgment. It is a silence that says you are enough, even if you say nothing. You are seen, even if you do not explain yourself. You are valued, even if you bring no achievement into this moment. That kind of silence heals because it touches the archetypal need for belonging and acceptance that lies within every human heart. Such silence is not absence but presence. It is the pause that allows emotions to settle, the stillness where unconscious truths can rise, and the calm in which laughter or tears may eventually flow without force. In this space, friendship mirrors the deeper self, reminding you that your worth is not tied only to what you produce but to who you are. In contrast, the noise at work, though necessary for progress, is transactional. It often measures value in output, in speed, in performance. But life cannot be measured only in such terms. Healing, balance, and individuation require the kind of still companionship that silence with a friend provides. It is in these quiet spaces that we rediscover ourselves, that the fragments scattered by business begin to reassemble into wholeness. Thus, silence with friends is not wasted time. It is sacred time. It is the space where the soul is renewed, where bonds deepen without effort, and where you remember that beyond the noise of work, life is sustained by connection, trust, and love. Noise may fill the day, but silence with a true friend fills the heart. The psyche longs for integration, not extremes, because the human soul is not built to live in fragmentation. Within each of us exists a multitude of forces: ambition and rest, work and love, solitude and companionship, discipline and play. When one pole is pursued to the exclusion of the other, the psyche begins to suffer, for extremes create imbalance. Overwork may bring temporary recognition, but it hollows the inner life. Endless leisure may soothe for a moment, but it erodes purpose. The unconscious, like a compass, continually pushes us toward balance, reminding us that wholeness is not found at the edges, but in the center where opposites meet. Extremes may feel powerful at first. They offer the illusion of clarity, of control, of simple solutions. Yet in time, they fracture the personality. The worker who neglects love becomes hardened and lonely. The lover who neglects work becomes dependent and insecure. The solitary who rejects companionship becomes consumed by their own inner storms, while the overly social who flees solitude loses touch with their own soul. The psyche rebels against such one-sidedness, often in the form of anxiety, depression, or burnout, signaling that something essential has been exiled. Integration, however, is the true calling of the self. It is the art of holding both sides without collapsing into either. To integrate is to work diligently while still making space for rest, to nurture ambition without abandoning tenderness, to honor both the individual journey and the bonds of friendship. It is to realize that the opposites are not enemies but partners in the dance of wholeness. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong task of uniting the many parts of the psyche into harmony. Individuation does not mean perfection or rigidity, it means fluidity, the ability to move between the opposites without being enslaved by them. It is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to labor and when to celebrate, when to be alone and when to belong. This, the psyche's longing, is not for the extremities that tear it apart, but for the center that brings it together. True strength is not found in choosing one side over the other, but in carrying both with dignity. Integration is the path to authenticity, peace, and depth of life. The extremes may dazzle for a moment, but only integration endures. Would you like me to expand this keynote into a metaphorical version, where integration is described as a bridge between two rivers or a weaving of opposites into one fabric? Your shadow emerges when you abandon either duty or delight, for the psyche is a field of tension where both must coexist. Duty anchors you to responsibility, to purpose, to the reality of contributing to life beyond yourself. Delight opens you to joy, to spontaneity, to the nourishment of soul and relationship. When one is sacrificed to the other, the neglected part does not vanish. It descends into the shadow, waiting, plotting, and eventually erupting in ways that disrupt balance. If you abandon duty for the sake of delight, your shadow may appear as guilt, laziness, or aimlessness. Life begins to feel shallow, ungrounded, lacking in structure or achievement. The unconscious, knowing that you have forsaken responsibility, gnaws at you with unease until you confront what you are avoiding. If you abandon delight for the sake of duty, your shadow emerges as resentment, bitterness, and quiet despair. You may appear diligent and disciplined on the outside, but within you something grows restless, longing for laughter, intimacy, and play. In time, this suppressed delight may burst forth destructively, in addictions, escapism, or sudden collapse, because the soul cannot live on obligation alone. The shadow's emergence in these moments is not punishment but a signal. It is the psyche's way of saying, "You have tilted too far in one direction, come back to the center." The shadow is the custodian of what you have neglected, and when you abandon either duty or delight, it rises to restore the missing piece, often with fierce and uncomfortable force. Individuation demands that you carry both, the sober weight of duty and the luminous spark of delight. To honor one while neglecting the other is to fracture the soul. To weave them together is to live in balance, where responsibility does not strangle joy, and joy does not sabotage responsibility. Thus, your shadow emerges not as an enemy but as a teacher. It points to where you have abandoned wholeness, reminding you that the self thrives only when both the serious and the playful, the disciplined and the free, are given their rightful place in your life. Boundaries are bridges to a saner life, for they are not walls that cut us off from others, but structures that allow connection without collapse. A boundary is the recognition that the self has limits, that your time, your energy, your emotions, and your spirit cannot be endlessly spent without renewal. When you say yes to everything, you betray yourself. When you say no, with wisdom, you protect the sacred ground of your being. Boundaries are not selfishness, they are the architecture of balance. Without boundaries, work devours rest, friendships suffocate under constant demand, and the psyche begins to fray at its edges. You find yourself scattered, resentful, or exhausted, unable to give fully to either duty or delight. The absence of boundaries creates chaos, where the urgent always overwhelms the important, and where your soul becomes a servant to every passing expectation. But when you set boundaries with clarity, life gains rhythm. Work has its rightful place, as does play. Solitude is honored, as is togetherness. You no longer confuse being constantly available with being truly present. Instead, you stand on firm ground, able to meet others not out of depletion but out of fullness. Boundaries then become bridges, pathways that allow healthy exchange between self and other, between duty and rest, between the inner world and the outer demands. To draw a boundary is to acknowledge your humanity. It is to say, I am not infinite, but I am worthy of protection. I am not a machine, but a soul that needs space to breathe. Boundaries teach others how to love you without harming you, and they teach you how to give without losing yourself. Thus, boundaries are not barriers to connection but conditions for authentic connection. They prevent enmeshment, resentment, and burnout, while opening the possibility of deeper intimacy, more focused work, and a life that breathes with sanity and rhythm. To live without boundaries is to live scattered. To live them is to walk a bridge toward wholeness. A life divided is a soul weakened. A life balanced is a soul strengthened. When you divide yourself, giving all your energy to work while starving your relationships, or pouring yourself into pleasure while abandoning your responsibilities, you create an inner fracture. That fracture is not merely practical, it is psychic. The soul senses the split and becomes restless, fragile, uncertain of its direction. Division breeds exhaustion, confusion, and a quiet despair, for no part of you feels fully honored. Work without rest becomes tyranny. Love without responsibility becomes chaos. Solitude without companionship becomes isolation, while companionship without solitude becomes suffocation. The divided life tries to chase one side of the spectrum at the expense of the other, but the unconscious always rebels. It whispers in dreams, in fatigue, in anxiety, reminding you that wholeness cannot be found in extremes. The soul withers when it is forced into lopsided living. But when life finds its balance, the soul grows strong. Balance does not mean a rigid schedule where everything is perfectly measured, but rather a dynamic rhythm, a dance between opposites. It is knowing when to step into labor with full commitment, and when to step out into play with open-hearted joy. It is the art of carrying both seriousness and laughter, both ambition and tenderness, without losing yourself in either. A balanced life strengthens the soul because it integrates the many voices within you. It gives space for the worker, the lover, the dreamer, and the thinker. Each part feels seen, each part given its rightful share of existence. In such balance, you no longer live in fragments but in harmony, and from that harmony comes resilience, clarity, and deep peace. To live divided is to betray your wholeness. To live balanced is to align with the self, the archetype of unity that resides within every human being. The strong soul is not the one that chooses extremes, but the one that carries opposites with grace. Balance does not weaken passion, it refines it. It does not diminish duty, it sustains it. It does not dilute love, it deepens it. Balance is strength, for it roots you in the center, where the fullness of life can flow. Balance is not the end. It is the eternal practice of the self. To imagine balance as a destination is to misunderstand its nature. Balance is not a static achievement, not a finish line where you can rest forever, but a living process that must be renewed each day. Just as the body requires constant breath, and the heart requires constant rhythm, so too does the soul require the ongoing practice of balance. The moment you declare yourself balanced and stop tending to it, imbalance begins to creep back in, like weeds in an untended garden. Self, the deepest center of your being, thrives not on perfection but on rhythm. Life will always shift. Seasons of work will demand more of you. Seasons of love will call you to step away from labor. Seasons of solitude will require withdrawal, and seasons of celebration will pull you outward. Balance is not about freezing these movements. It is about learning to move with them consciously, adjusting, bending, and returning to center again and again. When you treat balance as a practice, you become forgiving with yourself. You no longer see a missed moment of joy or an overworked week as failure, but as part of the dance, a reminder to recalibrate. Balance in this sense is alive, fluid, and compassionate. It honors the truth that the human psyche is not a machine to be programmed but a living mystery to be tended. To practice balance is also to live courageously. It takes strength to resist the world's pull toward extremes, toward endless productivity or endless distraction. It takes discipline to say no when duty threatens to consume delight, and it takes maturity to say yes when delight tempts you away from purpose. In walking this line, you honor both the groundedness of responsibility and the lightness of joy. Thus, balance is never achieved, once and for all. It is lived, moment by moment, choice by choice. It is a lifelong practice, the sacred art of alignment with the self. To embrace it as a practice is to embrace life itself, with all its fluctuations, contradictions, and demands. For as long as you live, balance will not be your trophy. It will be your way of walking through the world with wholeness. To balance your job and your social life is not to split yourself in two, but to become whole. For the one who learns this balance is not merely successful, and not merely loved, he is individuated. And in individuation lies true leadership, the kind that inspires both in the workplace and in the heart.